Welcome in. It's that time back here on a Wednesday because we're not traveling. The Sooners on SI podcast. Ryan Chapman here at the Moore HQ. We have the boss man, John Hoover, done running point from the home office, now just podcasting from the home office. Hoov, what's up? How are you?
Back in Broken Arrow, from the podcast. What would you call that? The podcast studios. The Sooners on SI podcast studios in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma.
It's magnificent, and I'm sure that you took in. Thank you for everyone who stopped into the pod last week,
Yep.
who was understanding of our guy Carson and I. We'll talk to Carson here in 1 second. For basically, so a year ago, we were at the Omni in Dallas. Plenty of room, plenty of SEC signage, great backdrop, stuff like this. Well, the Omni in Atlanta, they have a new Omni. It's at the Battery, which is where I was on Friday, where the Braves are. They've not given much TLC to the Omni in Atlanta, which meant our guy Carson Field and I had to podcast from the Sky Bridge between one side of the Omni to the other, because it was the only thing that was, first off, had chairs, was not awkwardly in a corner, was well lit. It kind of showed Atlanta in the background. So thanks for putting up with us and us podcasting in a weird, like, hushed tone to try not to disturb everyone around us. But I think it turned out okay, Carson.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. We made the most of it. I think both of us excited to be back in our studios, though I think mine could use a little bit more work. You and Hoove definitely have the upper hand there as far as backgrounds go, but it's nice to be back, still catching up on sleep, but we are very close to football season.
We're almost there, a little over a week away from camp, firing up in full swing back in Norman. But before we preview that, which we will do some previewing of that, there were some other news and notes. First, let's go back. We're all home. Carson and I traveled back in varying degrees. Who've we got a nice compromise. The Braves won the day I was there, so I was happy. The Yankees won the series, so you were happy. But while we were out in Atlanta, you were running point. You were still churning content from back in Broken Arrow. Carson and I talked a great deal about SEC Media Days. Before we move on to like the media poll and stuff that was released after we all left, going back, well, was there anything, or was there anything that really stood out to you from Brent Venables' fourth bite at the apple, doing the car wash and all that stuff at Media Days?
First of all, Ryan, I hope that all my media brethren and sisterin, is that right? Is that how you say that? I don't know. All my media colleagues, I hope they didn't miss me too much. It's my first conference media days that I'd missed in 22 years, 24 years. I can't remember, but yeah, it was not the easiest thing for me to navigate being the point man here at home. Lot of SEC now, a lot of Paul Feinbaum on the 85-inch out in the living room. Not my favorite way to attack media days. It just wasn't. But it was fun. It looked like you guys were having a good time. You guys were on TV probably as much as almost anybody. I'll say anybody, but almost anybody. So it was good to see you all taking on the workload like you did. I was proud of you. You did great work. You did amazing work, both of you, all week. I think we were one of the maybe 4 or 5 outlets that had somebody there for all 4 days. There wasn't a lot. So proud of you guys. You did great. The thing that stuck out to me the most from an OU perspective at Media Days, I said this on a radio show I did last week, I think, was just Brent Venables' unending, relentless positivity. You know, coming off another 6-7 season, you got a new quarterback, new coordinator, new defensive coordinator, him. He had to rebuild the coaching staff a little bit, fortify some things, bring in some guys. He's got Jim Nagy and his staff, you know, for lack of a better word, crawling around all over the place trying to find recruits. And Brent Venables continues to be the most positive guy in the room. He's got the best look, right, of 30,000 feet and a micro vision of what he's looking at and what he knows and what he's aware of. But yet he's the guy that comes out and is the face of the program and gives you that, like I said, relentless positivity. So I think from that perspective, OU's in good shape. We'll see if that translates into the season.
It's interesting because, Carson, I know you haven't been around for the full 4 years of Brent Venables. I laugh when Hoove says that because you're not wrong, but Brent Venables is also the first person to say that, like, he usually has an overly negative view of things because he's told us and the local media this multiple times, that his thought is always, that was fine. Where are we going to get attacked next? And that was like his job as a defensive coordinator. So I guess that could mean one of two things to me. A, that Brent Venables truly believes in the pile up of, by his admission, a terrible offensive coordinator hire, all the injuries, all that stuff. And he truly, after seeing Ben Arbuckle work for a couple of months and John Mateer, believes that things are going well, all that stuff. Or Brent Venables is so far in it that he has tied himself to the mast, and he is going to either sink or float and go down with this thing, which I think everyone knows that Brent Venables is either going to succeed or fail going 10 million miles an hour. That's how he does things. And it's just kind of funny because, Carson, when we get to the end of the week down at SEC Media Days, it feels like there was a big disconnect that formed. If you, like who, were watching the SEC Now coverage, the SEC Network stuff, you saw a lot of TV talking heads, all that talked about how optimistic they are toward John Mateer, how Oklahoma could be maybe a breakout, a dark horse, whatever. Some of the people, at least that I had talked to, were also very interested, Carson, in Oklahoma, what they were going to be. And then we get to the end of the week, Friday, you launch out there the SEC poll and all that stuff, and you look down, and the credentialed media did not share the view of the talking heads and all that stuff. As you look down, Carson, Oklahoma 10th in the preseason poll as voted by the credentialed masses in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I think that was very interesting, but you have to look at predicted order of finish is not power rankings. It's not necessarily stacking up who are the best teams. It's who finishes best in the conference. Because you compare, for example, OU schedule to Missouri schedule. Those teams with flip-flop schedules could be totally different teams. And picking, I know OU finished ahead of Missouri in those standings, but think about if OU had Missouri's schedule, they'd probably be at least a few spots higher. I had them at 10th personally. I think this is a team that's going to take a step forward. It would be hard for there to be as many bad breaks for the Sooners this year as there were in 2024. So I think this team definitely will be better. But from a wins and losses in conference standpoint, it's hard to imagine they're near the top few teams in the league. I think their range could be anywhere from 4th to 14th, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, this is a team that could really prove itself, but with the schedule, if things go wrong again, it could be another bad finish in conference.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. 4th to 14th. Who knows? What last year taught us is that literally the worst thing that can happen can happen. You lose your top 5 wide receivers, your offensive line's in flux the entire year. You know, your best running back goes out at midseason, and your 5-star quarterback is a complete bust because of all that stuff going on around him. You know, Jackson was probably, for the most part, fine if he had had all his players around him. But you strip back the offense to a bunch of backups and a bunch of freshmen and a couple of walk-ons, your quarterback's going to suck. Just is. That's just the nature of football. That's the worst case scenario that could have happened to Oklahoma last year, and they still won 6 games. So this year, if let's just say that the coin flips completely and it's not everybody gets hurt, maybe this time everybody stays healthy. What's the ceiling for this team? That's what we have to start asking. What's the ceiling? Against this schedule, it might not be that high. 8 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, maybe. That might be a long shot. But like I said, everybody got hurt last year. If everybody stays healthy this year, could be a different deal.
With this schedule, if you get to 9, you're going to be right in the thick of, you'd be in the same spot that Alabama was a year ago, as far as in the midst of all these discussions. Yeah. And for Alabama, it ended up being a little bit of like misfortune with Clemson coming through and beating SMU, when if SMU had just won that game in the ACC championship game, that would have probably created one more spot. But then you start getting into the context of like, how did the 9 wins come? How did the 3 losses come? Were they close losses? Were they getting blown out by a 5-5 Oklahoma team? Like, what does that look like? And that's where, piecing it together, it puts you in the hunt, and the context is what matters. What also is funny about the SEC a year ago is that we say, okay, what does 10th look like? Well, last year, 4th through 9th, Missouri, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, South Carolina, A&M, 4 through 9 all tied at 5-3 in conference play. A&M, kind of was the back end of that. Florida was 10th a year ago at 4-4 in conference play. And if you talk about, okay, if Oklahoma goes 4-4 in conference play, then you add the 3 gimmies in the non-con, you're already up to 7. If you can take advantage of a Michigan team in week 2 that, while The defense was mighty impressive in the bowl game against Alabama a year ago. That was just a bowl game. They're breaking a new quarterback. You've got a veteran Oklahoma defense that you hope will, in week 2, try to frustrate and confuse a new quarterback, all that stuff. You could, I mean, even if you get picked at 10th and you go from last year, that there's absolutely a pathway to an 8-4 Carson, where again, that's where we get into what is the context of like an 8-4 season, because in a capsule, in a vacuum, you might say 8-4, not good enough for Oklahoma. In a vacuum, you go 6-7, 10-3, 6-7, 8-4 plus a bowl game, probably not good enough for Brent Venables. But when you look at this schedule, I think that a lot of people, while you have the Oklahoma expectation applied to it, I think it could be forgiving if that includes like a really close loss to, you're not going to like losing to Texas, but if Texas is really good, a close loss to Texas, a close loss on the road at Bama, maybe get your soul crushed by South Carolina on the road with a hectic like LSU South Carolina game like a year ago where South Carolina comes on top. Like there'd be no shame in any of those results, and you still end up at a 4-4 that was good enough for 10th in the SEC last year.
Yeah, no, what stands out to me about this schedule is aside from really Texas, there are so many unpredictable elements for these SEC opponents that OU faces in 2025. There are 9 losable games, I feel like, on OU's schedule, but how many of those will actually be losses? Because, I mean, Ole Miss, Tennessee, new quarterbacks, totally new offenses, and Bama, they're starting a new quarterback. Milroe, obviously, in the NFL now. Missouri looks totally different. Auburn, of course, has our friend Jackson Arnold. So there are so many different pieces that I think all of these teams will be tough outs. Like I don't think there's an easy win on that schedule, but I feel like the unpredictability might actually work in OU's favor.
I think that's
If
fair.
oh, go ahead.
I think that's a fair assessment. There's a lot of unknowns in the conference this year. Maybe more, certainly more than last year when you had a bunch of established quarterbacks. And uh, I'm trying to think. I'm just scrolling through my very shady memory. Yeah, no, I think this year's league is, and we saw it in gosh, was it one stadium? Somebody predicted the or offered the win loss totals, and the best in the conference were 9.5. They were not projecting the win loss total to be anybody in the conference to have a double digit wins, and so that to me tells you that it's absolutely wide open. Yeah, Oklahoma's going to have some things break for it, obviously. Um, Jade Knott has got to stay healthy. John Mateer has got to stay healthy. Bill Beedmo and Kevin Wilson need to put their heads together on 5 starting offensive linemen if they all stay healthy. And then those wide receivers, you know, don't think Jaden Gibson's going to be part of the mix this year, but boy, you lose a Nick Anderson, you lose an experienced guy like Jalil Farouk. You got to replace that talent, and so far you've done it with guys who were on the FCS level or Group of 5 level or even a Division 2 level. So that could be a sketchy part. I know everybody says, "Hey, these guys are good. They're explosive. They're this. They're that. They're big-bodied. They're strong, fast." Okay, I'd like to see it on the field before I commit to believing it.
Well, I think that before you even talk about if they're good or bad, I think I'd just like to see the guys that are supposed to be the first string guys play football. That would be in itself
Yeah,
a big upgrade, whether they're talented enough or not, or all that stuff. One thing's for sure, if Oklahoma wants to be a quote unquote surprise team or things like that, then there's going to be a lot of Sooners that need to take the gathered SEC media by surprise. You look across the all conference teams that came out in tandem with the preseason poll, and you've got R. Mason Thomas. Tough beat on the second team as defensive end. That is fully, I think, you start talking about all the defensive ends in the SEC, and somebody's going to be left out of the preseason first team. I think there's a lot of respect for Jade Knott. He was also a preseason all second team selection, despite his injury riddled year last year. You look at John Mateer, not in that group. It was Laura Sellers, Arch Manning, and Garrett Nussmeyer, who I can forgive a bunch of SEC voters for picking 3 guys that they've seen play before, even if Arch hasn't played a ton of football at Texas. The only other contribution for Oklahoma came on the special teams in the form of our guy Ben Anderson reprising his role as the SEC third team long snapper. So this is not like a knock on him, but when you talk about guys that you think of being all SEC guys, really just 2 in R. Mason and Ott. And Carson, you look at it, and it's an Oklahoma defense that was really good a year ago, but probably when you look at preseason expectations, things like that, with Danny Stutzman headed to the league, with Billy Bowman headed to the league. I'm not sure that like a Robert Spears Jennings or a Kip Lewis really got the respect that they probably earned a year ago in this preseason voting. But at the same time, I think those are guys that are going to be more than happy to be like, we'll take that extra chip, we'll place it on the shoulder, we'll not be worried about it. And they would all give you the canned line of, we're worried about who's on the postseason team than on the preseason team.
It's funny you mentioned those two guys because that's exactly who I was going to say was snubbed from OU's defense. Those two players have definitely proven that they can be excellent. I think Lewis without Stutzman's going to be even better than he was in 2024. RSJ, I mean, he really proved to be one of the best at forcing fumbles last year in the nation. Had kind of, I don't know if I'd say a breakout season, but he really thrived in the secondary. And I'm curious to see how guys like Marvin Jones Jr. do. Obviously, never really lived up to it at Florida State, Georgia, but he was a highly touted prospect for a reason. There's a reason he had that much hype going into college. Maybe he turns out to be a star for the Sooners. And there are just a bunch of other guys too that I know Taylor Wine is somebody that R. Mason Thomas was like, yeah, he's going to be big in our defense, even though he hasn't done a lot so far. So you never know. It's all preseason stuff, just like the predicted order of finish. So you never really know. Freak things can happen, injuries can happen. Other players from other schools maybe aren't quite as good as the hype they get. So, I mean, take all of this stuff with a grain of salt.
Guys, I was looking back at the text message I sent you when I was preparing to write that story. Here are the 2025 preseason All SEC Sooners. I did not expect three, and I did not expect those three. One is a transfer, one is a long snapper, right, and the other guy was the second team All SEC last year. So, yeah, R. Mason Thomas was the only guy that you really thought for sure, okay, that's a guy that's going to be on here. I asked you about Mateer. We kind of came to the consensus, probably not. Understandable. I figured Ott might get some run. He did. R. Mason, of course. But I asked you about Jaden Jackson, freshman All-American. Eli Bowen, freshman All-American. Ryan, you fired back immediately. What about Kip or RSJ? Robert Spears Jennings was like fifth in the country in forced fumbles last year. And Kip had those two touchdowns, those two Kip sixes. Stuff like that catches people's attention when they're picking the all SEC team, you would think. And I thought with all the hype going into the Oklahoma's preseason with how good the defensive line is, we've heard from Phil Steele and unit rankings from all these preseason magazines and whatnot, so on and so forth. Lindy's does a unit rankings, and I thought Grayson Halton and Dominic Williams might squeak into the all preseason all SEC team just based on the hype that those guys have gotten. If not, Jaden Jackson at defensive tackle. So that it's probably a good thing that Oklahoma only got three, one being a long snapper, one being a first-time player, a transfer. It's probably a good thing because there's a lot of good players on this team now who see that and have an additional layer of motivation to go out and kick some butt this year.
I wonder just how much of the defensive turnaround at Oklahoma has been lost in the fact that they didn't win many games last year. You know what I mean? Like it's something that you look at. Oh my gosh, South Carolina put up 21 points in a flash. Yeah, well, none of that was on the Oklahoma defense. Right. It was two defensive scores for the Gamecocks and a short field touchdown. You know what I mean? Like the Missouri game, Oklahoma did give up that drive right at the end with the ended in Theo Weiss, all that stuff, but they're not in that spot if Jackson Arnold's not, rolling the ball around left, right, and center. And oh, by the way, it was a defensive score that put Oklahoma in a spot to blow that game. You know what I mean? So, so much of that, for a lot of the preseason stuff, especially defensively and like at wide receiver, is a lot of. Let me just pull up last year's SEC production rankings, and yep, that guy's back. That guy's back. I just wonder how much of this was lost in the shuffle of like, because Oklahoma's offense was so bad, the team was bad. And because the team was bad, no one in their head was thinking, hey, that's that Brent Venables defense that actually is playing really good football. It's just trying to like carry the weight of an SEC season on its shoulders by itself, and kind of got lost in the shuffle. Other things too, like I wonder, probably wouldn't have got on the list just because there's a lot of nice receivers returning and stuff like that. But if Deion Burks hadn't been like just hurt a year ago, let's say if this season Deion Burks was a transfer that had the same hype train when he came from Purdue, I wonder if he might have gotten some love as well. So there's a lot to get into with Oklahoma and all that. And we will as we open up our camp preview, stuff like that. Plenty of other stuff happening around too. If you head to the website, OklahomaSoonersOnAside.com, the first thing you'll notice, refresh front page. It looks really nice. Our friends over with the On SI network are going around making everything look uniform, making it look a little bit more like SI.com. So if you like that, hit us up, let us know. We'll pass that along, pass that up the chain. I think, first off, the thing for me, Hoove, is that they're focused on loading fast, which we love because we fire the content into the sun. And the best part about that is you never have to have an account or anything. Just hit OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com. Always free. We don't have stuff behind the paywall. The second thing you might have noticed, John, is a couple of big events here. We had Baker Mayfield stop into town. Carson was there. We'll talk about that here in a second. But this week, we also got the search committee for Oklahoma's athletic director. That thing's ongoing. We knew it was going to be chaired by Randall Stevenson. We know that he's the point man, the front man, all that fun stuff. It's a 12-member list. The ones that probably stuck out to those of us that are here to break down the sports side of Oklahoma and maybe not some of the institutional stuff is you've got Bob Stoops and Sherry Cole, a couple of legendary coaches who worked for a long time under Joe Castiglione. Sam Bradford, the Heisman Trophy winner, who has been more and more prevalent in Oklahoma everything since retirement and all that stuff. Kinsey Hansen, the softball stud, she's your student representative. I like to imagine a world in which Sam Bradford and Kinsey Hansen are texting each other on the side and submitting a list to Randall Stevenson. Who this is standard operating procedure in a spot like Oklahoma, right? You get a big committee, far-reaching people from the university side, from different areas of the athletic department. But it's still interesting nonetheless to see some heavy hitters there representing the athletic side for Randall Stevenson and his committee to find OU's new AD.
Heavy hitters. I see what you did there, Kinsey Hansen. I've been watching her with is it the Spark hit bombs in preseason or whatnot. So your scenario of Sam and Kinsey texting back and forth might be better illustrated if just imagine everybody goes into this meeting and they come out with, 15 names to start with, and Kinsey and Sam start texting back and forth. What a bunch of idiots. They don't know the first thing about about what an athletic director does, for the school, for the students. When I first saw this list, I was like, Kinsey Hansen, what? But she's representing the entire student body, so to speak. And I think that's great. I think that's a really good move on their part because that's who the athletic director ends up representing is the students. So Joe Castiglione always said that was their center, that was their compass, so to speak. It was as an athletic director, you respond to, you represent the students, the student athletes. So that turns out to be a big thing. And Kinsey's a great representative. She is. We talked about this over the years, Ryan, when she was a redshirt freshman. She was doing press conferences, and I'm like, this girl is so mature and got such a good head on her shoulders. Got a great perspective on, the life of a student athlete, the life of a catcher, an All-American catcher. But yeah, some of these other names. I mean, you knew Bob would be on it, right? You knew. Of course, Joe Castiglione is going to maintain his input. He's going to continue to be a voice, give them, share his contacts, so to speak, forward the contacts to people that might want to inquire about the job. Sam is interesting, absolutely, because he has been disconnected from the program just a little bit, especially while he was in the NFL. He didn't come back very often that I know of. He has done that since retiring. He's become a little more involved in coming back and taking part in activities and things like that. And then, Sherry Cole's been retired. I don't understand this designee from outside the university. She's been retired for, 5 years now? 4 years? So there's no doubt she's going to have input. She's got value because of who she is and her relationship with Joe professionally. I don't really know too much about these other folks. Vice president of executive affairs, chief of staff, vice president and general counsel, vice president for student affairs and dean of students. I don't know too much about the rest of the people that are on this list, but let's be honest with ourselves. Randall Stevenson is going to take all the recommendations. He's going to look at all the names. He's going to consider all the candidates, and then he's going to hire who he wants to hire.
I think the rest is just kind of like standard operating procedure as
Yeah.
far as,
Cover your
hey,
bases.
let's make sure everyone's involved, all that stuff, which is
Yeah.
perfectly fine because as we know, it'll be like you said, Randall Stevenson's running the point man. He's the chair of the committee, all that. I'm interested, like Bob has been around as we know, but not in the day to day. So is this going to be something where Bob and then Sherry, who served a similar role for the women's basketball program, Ginny's talked about hitting her up at different times, just being like, "What do you think about this?" Stuff like that. If maybe Bob and Sherry can be a hey, Lincoln and Brent asked me about da 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 in today's stuff. Sherry says Ginny asked me about da 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 da.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff to be a sounding board. But
It
let's
feels
not.
like it feels like their involvement is going to be more of a here are some of the qualities we want in an athletic director.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
I don't know what it all goes back to the big far-reaching conversation, right? When a couple weeks ago, when Joe Sigler announced his retirement, is do we know, does Randall Stevenson want someone fully out of the business world? Does he want someone that is a young athletic director of like a Zach Selman type that's seen the old world and the new when we talk about collegiate athletics? Does he want someone that's been in it for a while and is a proven track record of innovating on universities? What does that look like? It makes it tough to, come back through. And I don't think that the construct of this committee is going to change that fundamentally. It's just interesting to see what voices Oklahoma likes to pull there. Someone who's not on the committee but was back around Norman earlier this week, this weekend. Baker Mayfield in town for his football camp. And Carson, I'm just going to toss this over to you. You talked about a ton of stuff. John Mateer, Britt Venables, Joe Stiglione, life with the Bucks, reuniting with Sterling Shepard. Let's start with Mateer and kind of work through it. We heard the stories. We confirmed the stories, right? During the recruitment, Bill Belichick, North Carolina, they're coming after John Mateer. Mateer picks up the phone. Hi, I'm Baker Mayfield. I'd like to talk to you about this. We know that Mateer during the spring, he told us he wasn't trying to bug Baker too much. You can tell a little bit of the like, what's that? It sounds like though that that's not going to be the only conversation John Mateer and Baker Mayfield have, certainly over this season and the rest of Mateer's tenure in Norman.
No, it definitely doesn't. And that's quite the resource to have because nobody really embodies Oklahoma football like Baker Mayfield did in his 3 years. It's pretty impressive that Baker Mayfield's pull to Oklahoma was greater than that of Bill Belichick, who's won what, 7 Super Bowls at this point. Maybe he knew about the sideshows that would come with Bill Belichick's fiance. Maybe that was something that drove him away. But still very impressive just that Mateer went to OU after Baker's conversation. And it was really cool to hear how much promise he has in both Mateer, this program, Brent Venables. He is obviously he's someone that loves the university. I don't think he'd ever publicly say, like, yeah, we're doomed. But he seemed very enthusiastic as far as just what he believes this team can do in year two and beyond in the SEC.
I
real
actually
quick, I'll just add this, guys, for a little bit of context for our listeners and readers and viewers and whatnot. OU goes to Knoxville this year, right, for a game. It will be 10 years since Baker Mayfield made his big debut, so to speak, in Knoxville, 2015. 10 years has gone by since Baker debuted for the Sooners, and now he's in the NFL. Holy cow, how does 10 years go so fast?
if I Eddie and I are actually talking about that this morning as we were trying to figure out, hey, which games are we going to be flying to versus driving? And it's like drive to Tuscaloosa. Is this a fly to Nashville and drive over? We were like toss that around because it's July 23rd and the biggest story right now is Jerry Jones. We're done talking about Jerry Jones, and
Yeah.
it's insane to think that that was what a week two matchup, right? And it's something that I've talked about before, and maybe if I were better at my job, I'd write about this maybe. But it's too. It feels too much like prognostication and just looking to a crystal ball. But it's kind of crazy how looking back, that game is obviously iconic in the lore of Baker Mayfield, which makes it iconic in Oklahoma's lore. But that was a group that in week two went to Knoxville and nothing worked for a half. Little worked in the third quarter. You actually got two good drives, one or two emphatic goal line plays, and then overtime. And then that was like the launch pad for Baker Mayfield. You got a really good defense coming to town in week two this year. I'm just here to say if the offense doesn't move in the first and second quarter against Michigan, It doesn't mean John Mateer is going to be Baker Mayfield. It also doesn't mean that this offense can't be good by week 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So much stuff there. Part of that game, John, you and I know this, was a very iconic photo, a very iconic stop, and then leap by Sterling Shepard. A
Yeah.
decade later, those guys, or I guess 9 years later, got to reunite last year. I know that Baker talked a little bit about Shep. What was he talked about getting the band back together with the Bucks?
Yeah, that was neat to hear about. I mean, just looking at how his career's gone, he was a fairly good quarterback in Cleveland, and it kind of felt like he was done wrong by that organization. Moving on from him, of course, getting Deshaun Watson. Then he goes to Carolina. The Panthers are horrible. Baker doesn't play well, which is not surprising considering how bad that team was. Brief stint in Los Angeles with the Rams, and now he's led the Bucks to playoff appearances 2 years in a row. Really good team in the NFC South. And now being with Sterling Shepard, that's just another weapon to go along with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. That's got to be cool to have those two guys who have kind of been stars in the NFL, plus one of his old teammates. I mean, that's just a great fit. And from what I gathered at that media availability on Saturdays, that's where he wants to be for the foreseeable future.
You guys have heard of buyer's remorse, obviously. I did a radio show in Cleveland 2 days ago, or yesterday morning. Did a radio show in Cleveland. Yes. About, I'd say 70 to 75% of the fan base and the people who cover the team have what you would call seller's remorse on Baker Mayfield, rejuvenating his career somewhere other than the mistake by the lake that is Cleveland. They hate it. They were like, why did our franchise do him like this? And put all the blame on him. Yeah, just when it was unfolding, it was just like, poor Baker. How's he said, if anybody can rejuvenate the Cleveland Browns, it's me. And he did for 1 year. And then he got hurt. And then they shipped him away. And now he's thriving in the NFL. So just got to get away from Cleveland.
It's kind of crazy. We're going to make this Ryan centric for 2 seconds. How much of an effect the AFC West has on Baker's career arc. Because if it weren't for the touchback fumble rule against Kansas City, I don't know if Cleveland would have held on to win that game, but that was a turning point of the Browns going into Arrowhead and maybe being a little speed bump in the path of the Chiefs and what the Chiefs have become, which certainly would have probably changed the perception of Baker that next year, knowing he was playing through his shoulder and all that stuff. And then it was the Raiders that saved Baker Mayfield's career by getting their butt beat by him on 24-hour notice as Baker studied the playbook from Carolina over to LA. Then he plays on Thursday Night Football and wins that game. Anyway, so if you're watching Baker Mayfield and you're enjoying him with the Bucks, a passing thought for me, and if you'd like to thank me, you can put it in my Venmo, as I was a miserable Raiders fan that night. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy how these glass door moments in sports, and for Baker, he's had more than one of those, but certainly seems like he's in a comfortable spot now with the Bucks and a place that he's happy to kind of call home. And we've seen it a ton, whether it be this offseason, off seasons before. Anytime the Bucks front office goes on record and talks on a podcast or anything like that, anytime the O-line or receivers, it's always like, yeah, Baker's the first one up there. Great dude, hitting everybody up, trying to welcome everybody. It's everything. The Bucks are getting the version of Baker that Oklahoma fans knew so long about. Baker's the first one to reach out and all that stuff. And it's just cool to see Baker find himself a home because I think we all knew the potential he had. It was just the nerves of Cleveland, and we've seen that's been tough for multiple quarterbacks.
Find a home and $100 million contract.
Helps. That helps as well. 100 mil goes a long way in Tampa Bay, as it does all the way across. Back onto the Oklahoma side of things. Sooners due to open up camp next week. Be sure you head over to the website, OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com, not just for our previews of camp, all that stuff, but also on Monday, Sports Illustrated rolled out their preseason top 25. The Sooners snuck into 25, which I think kind of shows the duality of Oklahoma's season. It's a little bit like what we've talked about when it comes to there is optimism the team's going to be better. What does better look like on this schedule? How much better is better? All that stuff. But we'll go a long way to doing that. We'll talk about the defense and special teams next week as your preview going into camp. But Carson, let's start with the easy one. We tracked Mateer and Arbuckle all the way through spring practice. What are you looking for Mateer and Arbuckle through fall camp in the couple of weeks leading up to August 30th when the Sooners and the vaunted Redbirds of Illinois State roll into Norman?
Yeah, the one thing that sticks out to me is connection with the receivers that Oklahoma has. Obviously, they went on a big spending spree in the transfer portal, getting guys like Keontez Lewis, Giovanni Gibson, Isaiah Satania, Josiah Martin. I mean, a big haul that they got from the portal. And I'm curious just how this kind of free agency type approach goes with Mateer, Arbuckle, this new system. I mean, it's going to be a lot different than it was, and that goes without saying with Seth Luttrell leading the unit last year. So I think just that's one of the big things. Obviously, we've seen that Mateer can play. He's a dual threat, can do a lot of things. I want to see how long it takes in a game setting to actually get that connection with some of these receivers, all of whom he's never played with before.
I also don't know how they're going to piece this thing together because it felt like in spring ball, Giovanni Gibson continually came up as well as Satania, excuse me. A little bit of stop start with Keontez Lewis and like Josiah Martin as far as getting a smidge banged up, things like that. And then Gibson goes down, which leads to Oklahoma going out and getting Jermichael Carter, hoping to, if nothing else, can he plug the hole early while Gibson gets back up to speed? And as we talked about last week, Brett Venables said Giovanni's out of the boot. As he gets full speed, all that stuff, we'll get those updates to follow. But it'll be interesting, Hoove, because you're looking at there's a couple of groups of guys that I find fascinating. First off, like Deion Burks getting back healthy, can he just find a way to stay on the field and be the impact? But then you look at like Zion Kearney, Zion Raggins, Ivan Carrion, true freshman a year ago, true freshman thrown into a terrible spot for true freshmen, but guys that didn't really produce at all up until Kearney had like a nice moment in the bowl game. Can they take that and now use that as a platform to say, okay, we got everything thrown at us at once? Can you build on that? What are the transfers going to look like? And then it's Elijah Thomas and Manny Choice. Those are the two freshman wide receivers that physically a big body in Manny Choice. And while Elijah's not a small guy, he's the explosive, do everything, was all over the place, all over the field at Chakotay. Like, can those guys earn enough respect immediately that Emmett Jones doesn't have like freshman PTSD if they get thrown into the fire early?
Yeah, one thing that I think Emmett Jones would like to avoid is the emergence of somebody like Jacob Jordan, for instance. Walk on, true freshman, unheralded, and by midseason, he's your best receiver. How the hell did that happen? Well, everybody else got hurt. Nobody else was consistent. If that happens again, that's a nightmare, right? That's a worst case scenario. So I think everybody appreciates the work that Jacob did as a freshman. Again, completely unheralded. Nobody expected him to do anything as a freshman, a true freshman walk on, and he, in some measure, held that thing together for a little while the other young guys came along. So that was cool to see. But with all the newcomers you've got, all the five names that we've mentioned over and over, those guys have to be your frontline players. Those guys have to contribute in a big way. And Deion Burks has to stay healthy. He just has to stay healthy. If he does, okay, that's a big if, because he was in and out of the lineup with various injuries last year. If he stays healthy, I think Mateer has a security blanket, a comfort zone that he can go to. And I think that really gives everybody else a little time to get going as newcomers to the SEC, because I will argue, okay, offensive line, offensive tackle, and defensive end might be the one that you could argue is a better or a more difficult individual matchup. I think the toughest individual matchup when you get to the NFL or a college league like the SEC, the toughest individual matchup is for a wide receiver to get separation from those big, strong, athletic, long-arm defensive backs, cornerbacks especially. That's why it's so tough to get open. We saw it last year. We saw, Jackson Arnold's running around like, oh my God, there is nobody open. I got to get out of here. It's because they're playing in the SEC against SEC cornerbacks with receivers who were not ready for that show. So the receiver core has got to come up, has got to grow, has got to explode, get in and out of breaks. Route running is going to be huge. Timing is going to be huge, especially with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. Timing is going to be everything, because if Mateer gets back there and things all of a sudden get off schedule, you're looking for a guy and he's not there, or you're ready to throw to a guy and he's covered. that's when the passing game goes south, as poor Jackson Arnold found out last year.
One thing that will help, and who I don't want to put us into our own version of PTSD here, but how many times were we up in a press box post game just feeling like, hey, we've got this game going on in the background,
Yeah.
and these two teams stink. But you know what's happening? On first down, the offensive coordinator has a timing route in his arsenal
Mm-hmm.
that got somebody open, at least got them 4 or 5 yards to start a drive or start a new set of downs. You weren't getting that a year ago at any point, and that was Brent Venables has taken that on his shoulders due to the failure of the hire of Seth Luttrell.
Yep.
That is not the case with at least some of these Washington State games. I've gone back and watched here in the last couple of weeks, like the Texas Tech game, which is available on YouTube, a big extended clip of the Boise State game. It's like, even if they didn't score, you were going, okay, that was like an easy pitching catch for Mateer to get him in rhythm. That stuff was lacking a year ago. Mateer talked a lot at SEC Media Days about being able to take his check downs. You really like the prospect of Jaden Ott if he's a check down. Taylor Tatum still out there earning snaps. If he's able to do that, he's a check down. Xavier Robinson showed that he can catch the ball in the backfield, be comfortable. But if John Mateer is going to be able to take those shots and take advantage of it, whether the receivers are great, bad, otherwise, he's gonna have to have time. And when you look at it, Fabechi Wiwu, the only guy a year ago, boys, that started every game, only position right guard that didn't have at least 3 starters. Troy Everett is healthy coming into fall camp, so that's a good sign as he's going to battle with Jake Michael at center. But when you look at it, Carson, it 3 spots at least, both tackles and left guard, feel like a really, really intriguing battle. But I think I can make the argument with you that all 5 spots are going to be fully up for grabs on this offensive line from practice one all the way into leaving the Cotton Bowls. That's the Bill Beanbo timeline. You find your 5 usually by week 7.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And that kind of has to be the case with how much instability there was last year, how many players they added, obviously getting the duo of Stanford transfers and Derek Simmons. So there should be a lot of competition. And I think if nothing else, the Illinois State game is a great opportunity to get all of those guys into the rotation, see who does what, see who's best with this, what combinations work best for the Sooners. They probably won't have their firm, this is our starting line by the Michigan game. But I love the opportunity that a game against a team like Illinois State, a good FCS team, but shouldn't stick around with the Sooners for too long in a home game season opener, should be able to out physical them. So getting some reps from just about everybody on the line in game one, I think will be huge for Bait and Bow. Maybe they won't have to trot out 9 different starting lineups in the first 9 games of the season, just thinking out loud here, but that would be beneficial. Mateer obviously would benefit from that, and so would the entire offense.
I have a quick question about the offensive line, and I raised this at some point when I was previewing the position battle coming up. Does Bill Bedenbaugh and Kevin Wilson? First of all, does Kevin Wilson come in and say, "Fabechi, I'm not impressed by him at all"? You know what I mean? Because he's a new set of eyes, or not just to pick on Fabechi, but anybody that played last year. Logan Howland, what's he doing? I've seen the best of the best. These guys are not it yet. We got some coaching to do to make them better. But the real question becomes, does Oklahoma, we saw with Logan Howland last season, Logan Howland and Heath Ozeda on the left side, they came in and kind of stabilized things at the same time as Troy Everett came in at center. Okay, so they got the left side of that line rebuilt along with Fabechi stayed on the right side. Suddenly the offense started playing better after the South Carolina game, I think it was. So do they go with those 2 young guys who are kind of established themselves and are have an upward trajectory? Or do they go with like a Sexton and Jake Taylor, who are older, have a little more experience, might have a better grasp of the offense? I don't know. A lot more experience. Or do they go with the 5-star and the Fasusi and the 4-star Foje at those positions? Because there's 3 different ways you can go. It's like, these guys played well last year. These guys are our senior leaders. These guys are our future. So I'd love to see what's in be a fly on the wall of the staff room and the offensive line to see which way they go with that.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating because here a couple of weeks ago, we went through and did a ton of our pre-camp depth chart. So we weren't projecting where we think it'll be game one. We were projecting where we think it'll be day one of camp. And I know I sent the offensive line back and forth to you a couple times, Hoove, because
Yeah.
on one hand, I feel bad putting a bunch of oars on that depth chart because
Yeah.
I have no problem rolling out a take. I have no problem being like, yep, I was wrong on that or I was right on that. What I don't like is just like, oh, let's play this thing both ways. But when you look at the offensive line depth chart, I think you have to because like the only guy I feel like fantastic about starting game one is Eddie Pierre-Louis, and he is not someone that played more than 4 games last year because Troy Everett and Jake Michael, like I think Troy Everett will start. He's got the institutional advantage of learning the offense through the spring where Michael had to come in, but Michael had played at Stanford. Like he's not a dummy, right? He'll be able to pick that thing up pretty quick. You look everywhere else, and some of the injuries of guys that missed spring ball, if you'll remember, Logan Howland and Heath Ozida both had shoulder cleanups, which meant that they couldn't try to take the improvements they made toward the end of last season and then have that every single day and build on that throughout spring ball. So, like, what does Sexton and Howland? What does that battle look like of a guy in Sexton that was able to be back in the mix versus a guy this summer kind of coming off the min? You look at very, very similar on the right side of the line. Derek Simmons at right tackle, a Western Carolina transfer who I probably wouldn't have penciled in as like a day one starter when he committed. But then you look at the fact that Jake Taylor, who we've yet to see the anywhere close to the best of Jake Taylor because he was behind good offensive tackles. Then last year, even when he played, he was dealing with multiple injuries. And so you look at what is Simmons, Jake Taylor, Fasusi on the left or the right. In a weird way, the injuries at tackle meant that Fasusi was thrust into a lot more snaps than maybe he would have gotten during the spring. So that's interesting. And then it's like very similar. Heath Ozida coming off of it. What does that mean for an Ozida Eddie Pierre-Louis battle at left guard where Eddie was parked while Fabetti was playing right guard? And then I'm a big proponent always of the like just because you have returning production doesn't mean you want that to be returning production. So like if Heath comes back in and can pick that up, then I think you need to look at is there a way that someone can pass Fabetti? I think that'd be like good news for the ceiling of the line. The thing, Carson, that it all comes back in is this. Bill Beanbo traditionally does not like to trust those young guys early, but the last 2 years he's had some mixed experience with that. 2 years ago, by the time Iowa State and Cincinnati, Caden Green, the true freshman, who before Fasusi and Foje at the time, Caden Green was the highest signed recruit he'd ever had. Caden Green slotted in and became a really key part of that line, especially during the Texas game. Now, one of the big differences between like throwing a Fasusi out there next to a Ozida or Pierre Louis is that Caden Green was parked in between Walter Rouse, who was a veteran of college football, even if his first year at Oklahoma, and a very, very experienced center. Was that Andrew Rame there? So that was the difference is that you have two guys on the side of that. Then last year, by the end of it, you had the whole fresh left side of the line with Howland and Ozida. So I do wonder, Carson, if that's something that Beanbo has now had 2 years of you're in a college football playoff race, hopefully, fingers crossed, 2 years ago, and you fall at Kansas or OSU, or you might be in the mix to go to the Big 12 championship game, or you were in the mix there. Last year, you're in the SEC with a couple of underclassmen. I wonder if that's enough for Beanbo to trust it a little more, or if he immediately goes back to the old ways of we'd like to bring Fasusi along halfway through the year, but we're going to go with veteran guys because that's what Beanbo's usually done.
It'll definitely be interesting to see, especially in this era of college sports where transferring's become so normalized. They want to give players like Fasusi incentive to stay, and maybe that is early playing time, especially in the games against Kent State, Temple, Illinois State. I mean, that seems like prime time for him, Owen Hollenbeck, Ryan Foje, some of the other young guys on the line to get some reps, show what they can do, see if they can really translate to the college level. I feel like I've always had this take that positions like offensive line, D end, not the skill position guys, usually the star ranking means a little bit more. Like you're less likely to just be a total bust if you're an offensive lineman than you are a quarterback, receiver. It's easier to grade. You can kind of grade based on that natural athleticism, size. Fasuzi has both of those things. And I feel like Badenbo, whether the offensive line's good or bad, they're going to want to find ways to shuttle him in just with the size he brings, athleticism, skill. There's a reason all recruiting sites had him so highly ranked. So I mean, even if he's not game one starter, finding ways to get him involved, I think would be huge.
I wonder too how what Kevin Wilson's input is going to be as a guy who's been around so many unbelievably great offensive lines, who's been the coach or the coordinator. I wonder what his input's going to be with Bedenbaugh. We all know they're going to be on the same page ultimately, but let's just say the scenario comes up where Bedenbaugh says, "Well, this was my best left tackle last year. This is my most experienced left tackle. We're going to go with the battle between these two guys." And Kevin Wilson comes up and goes, "Have you really? I didn't recruit him, and I haven't really coached him yet. But look at Fasusi. Look how good he is. Look at his upside. You know, does the assistant offensive line coach go to the head coach, Brent Venables, who hired him, right, and say Fasusi needs to play? This guy, his ceiling is untouchable." So I just wonder. I'm not pointing or casting aspersions or anything. I'm just saying the dynamic that's going to exist between those two really strong Type A personality offensive line coaches could be interesting to watch.
Fasusi's got a good head on his shoulders too, because he's a Chelsea guy. So we're all good on that on the Fasusi side of things. It kind of falls in line with, and I wrote this on Saturday. I know I wrote on Saturday because I was at Atlanta Hartsfield. It might have published on Monday. The days kind of run together, but part of what I wrote, it wasn't quite a full-on column, but it kind of got there by the end of it, was for Brent Venables, this is a make or break year. And what did he do? He said, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to hand the keys to the Ferrari that is an Oklahoma offense, or what the Oklahoma offense should be, to a 29-year-old who's had 4 years of college football play calling experience. And for Bill Bedenbaugh, who we know that whatever five he picks is going to be a better unit by the end of the year than where it starts, all that stuff. Follow the example of your head coach. Your talent, a Jacob Sexton is in that group, a Troy Everett, but the highest ceiling group has Eddie Pierre-Louis in it. The highest ceiling group probably might be either Sexton or Howland and Fasusi, that kind of stuff. It feels like every 4 years LSU's throwing out a freshman offensive tackle in the SEC, and 3 years later that guy's like a number one overall draft pick type thing. The freshmen can thrive in this league if you know that they've got that kind of mental makeup. To save everything here, it's not going to get done by playing it safe, and that would be my attitude if I were Bill Bedenbaugh. He also gets paid a lot more than I and has forgotten more about offensive line play than I'll ever know. So we shall see as that goes. The only other spot on the offense, quickly, Jaden Ott's going to be your starter. I'm just going to be curious at running back, like where does the Javonte Barnes, Taylor Tatum, Xavier Robinson, and frankly, we wrote about the tight ends and everything that Brent Venables had to say about the tight ends, guys. Caden Helms is a great dude. Love talking to him. I'm not going to be bought in on the Caden Helms offseason for the fifth time until we see that happen. I'm also not going to be trusting a guy from Pittsburgh State or Kennesaw State until I see them at tight end making an impact. So I don't know what to do with the tight ends. Maybe that makes me bad at this because I don't have a big overarching thing. I'm expecting that production, though, if they need it, to come from those other guys, that running back room where there is talent, Carson, but it feels like for the first time since Eric Gray was the one and Javonte Barnes was the two, Jade Knott's the one, and it's on everybody else to either take carries away from him or shove everybody else out of the rotation by saying, if it's not Jade Knott, I need to be the guy with the football in my hands.
I do like the depth of the running back room overall. Seeing guys like Javonte Barnes, Xavier Robinson looked really good at the end of last season. Taylor Tatum still on the roster. A lot of those guys could be starters at high level programs, but having a guy like Jaden Ott, sure, he hasn't ever done it consistently against SEC opponents, but he looked really dang good when he was healthy at Cal. Kind of a versatile guy. Once he hits a crease, he's pretty much gone. Can also catch passes. That's huge for this new pass first offense with Arbuckle. And then having guys like Robinson, who's so young, looked really good, especially against Alabama last year. I think that makeup, maybe it does add a little healthy pressure to Jada, not seeing like, yeah, you've got some really good backs behind you. Like, you better live up to this. Maybe that's good for him. Maybe that's going to make him perform a little bit better. And then obviously, when he needs a little rest, OU can feel comfortable giving the ball to guys like Robinson, Barnes, Tatum. So it's an impressive core, I think.
Ryan, did you bring up the tight ends again?
Yeah, the tight ends exist. That concludes our coverage on the tight ends in Oklahoma. And I'm sorry, until Joe John Finley's group is like
Yeah,
positively impacting games,
yeah.
there are a lot of names. None of them have played any legitimate, like, big time football.
Um, Complete agreement. Complete agreement with that. Big opportunity for guys like Caden McIntyre and Caden Helms. Big opportunity for our man Jaron Kanik. He could be one of the leaders. He could step up as one of the leaders on the offense because of his personality and his general knowledge. He's played a lot on defense. He's a popular guy. He's got his great head on his shoulders. Comes from a great family. He could be one of the guys on defense, on offense, to be a leader if he'll step into that position, if he'll produce, if he can catch 15, 20 balls this year as a in and out kind of tight end, play both on the end of the line and maybe in the slot a little bit, maybe move him around a little bit. I think that's something that would really help this offense, having a guy that you can rely on. And, those other guys, you don't see a lot of productivity at their previous stops. You see a lot of blocking tight ends, a lot of jumbo tight ends, a lot of third tight ends. So big opportunity for Kanik for me.
Something, too, that Arbuckle very creative with that. Two things out of his tight ends a year ago. One, like you said, who big portions of the running game. And while they didn't have this massive role when it comes to receptions and yards, they did have, I think, 7 touchdowns spread across 3 different tight ends a year ago. So if they can find a red zone threat, likes to make that happen. Jared Kanak's been in the end zone before. Jared Kanak has, when you talk about special teams, stuff like that. His contributions in Lincoln, Nebraska are the most important thing an Oklahoma tight end has done since Braden Willis has been around. And I'm talking about him playing as a cheetah on defense for a second half. So Ben Arbuckle was legitimately very excited about the tight end progress at the end of spring ball, all that stuff. They may be one of the best position groups on the team come November. Until that happens, though, it's a big question mark for me. And I've been burned a couple of times by expecting Joe John Finley to improve that group. He's yet to show that he can do any tight end coaching at Oklahoma, which I think is a big credit to Braden Willis and Shane Beamer for what Braden Willis did in 2022. Finally, guys, let's close here. Let's take a step back in the college football world still, but we've had all of the infighting between conference commissioners as far as it comes to college football playoff models and all that stuff. I think we'll let you know when there's some movement on the college football playoff model post 2026. There has been movement, though, with the College Sports Commission, NIL Go, which is the big NIL clearinghouse. We heard so much SEC Media Day. Lane Kiffin talked about we're operating with a hard cap, all this stuff. Well, as the first couple of deals went through the clearinghouse, Ross Dellinger's been on top of all this reporting over at Yahoo, talking about every school is sending out like a test balloon of will this get approved, will this not get approved. Well, there was some news here over the last 48 hours. It appears that the power conferences and the lawyers for the House settlement and the College Sports Commission have gotten together. They have made an agreement or come to an agreement that the College Sports Commission will treat collectives as businesses. So what does that mean? Collectives are not going to go away. Collectives can be a legitimate part of NIL. Will there be more scrutiny on market rates, things like that? Well, that's to be seen, but basically we have a soft cap. Your soft cap is going to be the revenue sharing, and then if your collectives can get those deals through NIL Go, you'll still be able to go over that $20.5 million for athletics, a lot of that diverted toward college football. And we'll still have collectives as a part of life, which kind of pairs hand in hand, Hoove, with Oklahoma bringing the NIL and stuff in-house, the big partnership with Learfield that was announced while we were at SEC Media Days, as far as bringing one Oklahoma together under Learfield and trying to streamline that situation. That's not going to go anywhere, but you would hope that maybe it gets a little less wild, wild west, even though there's still going to be collectives and NIL and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to spend the next hour reading the last 3 stories to you guys from Ross Dellinger. He's been on top of this like nobody in the history of college football has ever been on top of a topic. Ross is the man. No, I'm not going to read to you. I will read a little bit because this is, the scope of this thing is so huge. It's so huge, and it's changing. Talking to people about the new athletic director and talking to Joe Stiglione or talking to Sankey last week, whoever it is, they're like, everybody's saying, well, it's changing so fast, right? ... And it is. It absolutely is changing so fast that we yesterday we went into this week yesterday thinking one thing. that the power conferences and the College Sports Commission were going to be what one of the attorneys plaintiffs, or I'm sorry, one of the attorneys, yeah, one of the plaintiffs' attorneys. There, I said it right. Said we don't want this. We don't want college sports to become a bare knuckle brawl. So he said this, this agreement avoids that. That was Monday. And then Tuesday, Ross has another story today. I'll just make a quick note of it here. This is from the Twitter account of Mitt Winter, who I follow on Twitter. He's a sports attorney. He's basically following Ross to boil down what Ross's 1,000-word epics are about. This is a tweet from Mitt Winter. He says a bill has been introduced into the Senate. Okay, stop right there and think about that for a second. A bill has been introduced into the Senate that would allow college athletes to unionize and collectively bargain. They're going to turn college athletics into a union, like the NFLPA, right? It would amend the National Labor Relations Act so that it covers private and public universities. Okay, so that's basically everybody. Previously, it was like Northwestern and a couple of small private schools were getting in saying we should be allowed to unionize. Well, this bill has been introduced in the Senate that would allow them all sports, all student athletes, all universities, all across the country to unionize. It would require the National Labor Relations Board to recognize schools and conferences as multi-employer bargaining units. We're talking about professional sports here. Don't even use the word college anymore, in my opinion. The Oklahoma Sooners. Oh, they're in the state of Oklahoma? Okay. Are they affiliated with the University of Oklahoma? You see what I'm saying? What's the point? What's the relevance of saying this is a school team? These are all professionals now. It's like I said, it's changed so fast and so dramatically in the past just 3 years, year and a half, 6 months, 30 days, 2 days. It's crazy.
It's part of what, Jokes of the Own talked about when I asked him about, what is on the next horizon. And he first started out, I don't know if it's going to be employees, student athletes, all that stuff, but you got to find a way to somehow square this circle with the athlete and the fan base of why am I at Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Why am I at Texas? Why am I at Ohio State? Well, I go to Oklahoma Engineering School because it's a good engineering school that can help you get to the next. Like, that's something that people can get as long as you're finding a way to connect with Oklahoma. You're part of the campus community. That's the same thing that athletics is going to have to do. People, I think, are going to be fine with understanding, why do you go play football in Oklahoma? Because you want to get to the NFL. You got to make money, whether you're an employee of Oklahoma or not. It's going to have to find a way to bring those things together where you're still involved. They've been able to do that to a certain extent, even as things have changed. It'll be interesting to see if they're going to continue to be able to do that. All I know is this. When you talk about collective bargaining stuff like that, one name that Randall Stevenson should scratch off the big board is anyone involved with the NFLPA, because they clearly have screwed that thing up left, right, and center. Shout out to our friend Pablo Torre for shining the spotlight on that.
That's a good point. I loved your question to Joe C, and I loved his answer, but he did say, and it stuck out to me a little bit, he did say that if we could just keep education at the center of this thing. It's not what most of your student athletes care about now. A lot of them do. Women's soccer does. Softball does. You know what I mean? Women's basketball, they care about the education. Golf, tennis, track. The education aspect is enormous. Football, basketball, men's basketball, not so much.
It'll be interesting. All that. And something you said. Ross Dellinger's Epics. Gentlemen, I can't wait to tell you, in 2028, coming to an IMAX near you, the Commission, they're going to have Christopher Nolan turn all of Ross Dellinger's stories into a thrilling 3-hour epic coming shot in whatever new IMAX thing that they invent for him. The Commission. Again, look for that trailer, and I assume Brad Pitt will star in that, I would hope. I don't know who's going to play Ross. If you're looking for an extra to walk behind the camera at SCTV these days, you can just use Carson and I think, because I think we filled that role pretty well last week, my friend.
Yes, we did. We absolutely did.
Crushed it.
For all the continuing updates, all that fun stuff, because like I've said before, we all got into this because we like telling stories and we like sports. And if I had liked this part of it, I probably would have just gone and covered government or business, or I'd be a front office sports writer. And I really don't care to that. So just head to OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com. All the big stuff that comes through, we'll try to digest it down into a readable version. If not, then we'll just wait for the big stuff, the press releases to get sent out. You can find us there, OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com, or you can follow us at Sooners on SI on X, formerly Twitter. John's at John E. Hoover. I'm at _Ryan Chapman. Carson is Carson D. Field. We'll be back next Wednesday. Everything that's happened over this week, previewing the defense and special teams, talking about camp, because we'll be days away from the Sooners hitting the practice field next time we talk to you on the Sooners on SI podcast. Until then, though, we'll see you. Be good. Have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy the summer. Stay dry. Stay cool. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.